The storage room smelled like cardboard and rust and something worse, something metallic that caught in the back of the throat. November rain hammered against the single frosted window, casting shifting shadows across boxes of napkins and industrial cleaning supplies stacked floor to ceiling. It was 3:22 in the morning. Luca Vitoli lay on the concrete floor, his breathing shallow and fractured. The bullet had entered his side just above the ribs, and his $8,000 Italian suit, tailored in Milan, worn only twice before, was soaked through with rain and blood. His hands, the hands that had signed 17 death warrants without hesitation, trembled as he pressed them against the wound. His jaw clenched. His dark eye stared at the ceiling, unfocused, already beginning to drift somewhere beyond the pain. Outside, the November wind cut through the alley like a blade wrapped in ice. He had maybe minutes. Maybe less. The back door of the diner burst open, and footsteps echoed across the linoleum kitchen floor. Not the footsteps of his men. Not the measured stride of someone trained in violence. These footsteps were quick, panicked, belonging to someone who had just heard a commotion in the storage room and moved without thinking. Alara Cole stood in the doorway for exactly 2 seconds. She wore an apron stained with coffee and grease from the breakfast rush, and her orthopedic shoes, the ones her feet demanded after 12 hours of walking, were wet from mopping the diner's cracked floors. She was 34 years old but looked older. Her dark hair was pulled back in a bun that had come loose somewhere around 2 a.m. Her hands were rough, calloused from years of work that paid $5.47 an hour. She saw the man on the floor. She saw the blood. She did not scream. She did not freeze. She dropped to her knees beside him, her movement sudden and certain, and ripped open his shirt without hesitation, tearing buttons, exposing the wound. The blood was dark and still flowing. Her mind did not ask questions. Her body simply moved, the way bodies move when they recognize an emergency, when survival instinct overrides fear. "Stay with me," she said, her voice steady like someone soothing a frightened child. "I've got you. Don't move." She grabbed dish towels from the pocket of her apron, she always carried extras, habit from years in food service, and pressed them against the wound with steady, firm pressure. The towels darkened immediately, the blood soaking through. She did not look away from his face. "What's your name?" she asked. He did not answer. His lips were pale, almost gray. She pulled out her phone, the screen cracked from when she had dropped it 3 weeks ago and could not afford to replace it. Her hand shook as she dialed, but her voice remained calm when the dispatcher answered. "I need an ambulance. There's a man, he's been shot. The diner on 14th and Madison, the one called Night Owl. He's in the back storage room. He's losing a lot of blood." "How long ago was he shot?" "I don't know. Maybe 15 minutes. Maybe longer. Just please send someone." She pressed the towels harder, and the man's eyes finally found hers. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in those dark eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or fear. Or something else entirely, something she could not name. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But people needed to hear it anyway. The siren started 3 blocks away. She could hear them cutting through the November rain, getting closer, closer. She stayed beside him, her hand steady on the wound, her voice low and constant like a prayer. "Help is coming. Stay with me. Just stay with me." His breathing slowed. His eyes began to close. "No," she said, sharper now. "Look at me. Look at my eyes. Help is coming. You're not dying on this floor. Not tonight. Not while I'm here." His eyes opened again, barely, and locked onto hers. And in that moment, in the fluorescent light of a storage room that smelled like cardboard and rust, with November rain hammering against the window and sirens screaming through the city, something passed between them that neither would ever be able to explain. The ambulance arrived at 3:29 in the morning. Paramedics flooded through the storage room, and Alara stepped back, her apron soaked with blood that was not her own. They loaded him onto a stretcher and moved quickly, professionally, their movements efficient and practiced. She stood there in the storage room while they worked, watching the stranger disappear out the back door and into the November night. No one asked her for a statement. No one asked her name. She was just a waitress in a stained apron, already forgotten as soon as the ambulance pulled away. She walked back through the kitchen and out to the diner floor. The clock on the wall read 3:31. Her shift ended at 6 a.m. She had 2 hours and 29 minutes left. She picked up her mop, wet from earlier in the evening, and began pushing it across the cracked tiles. Her hands were still trembling. Her heart was still racing. She did not know that the man she had just saved controlled half the criminal operations in Los Angeles. She did not know that his name was Luca Vitoli, and that he had built an empire on vengeance after watching his father murdered when he was a teenager. She did not know that he had 17 men who would do anything he commanded, that he had more money than she could comprehend, that he lived in a world of violence and power that operated by rules entirely foreign to her own. She did not know that the gunshot wound had been orchestrated by Anthony Marchetti, Luca's own nephew, a man in his late 40s with expensive tastes and a deep hunger for power. Marchetti had spent the last 3 years building his case, gathering allies, waiting for the right moment to strike. Tonight was that moment. He had hired professionals, men who owed no loyalty to Luca, men who asked no questions. The plan had been simple: kill Luca, blame a rival family, seize control while his remaining men were still grieving and confused. What Anthony Marchetti did not know was that Luca would survive. And what Alara Cole did not know was that saving Luca's life would pull her into a world where miracles came with a price, where debts of gratitude ran deeper than blood, where a single night could change everything. But that was still hours away. For now, she was just a tired woman pushing a mop across a diner floor at 3:31 in the morning, her hand still shaking, her mind still caught on the image of those dark eyes looking into hers. She did not know that in 14 days, her life would be unrecognizable. The clock ticked forward. The rain continued to fall. And across the city, in a private hospital room on the 23rd floor, Luca Vitoli regained consciousness long enough to ask one question: who brought me here? Who called the ambulance? The answer would change everything. Now, let us go back. Let us rewind to 12 hours earlier, to the moment before the blood, before the ambulance, before everything fractured and reformed into something new. Let us go back to when Alara Cole was still invisible, still drowning, still believing that she would never escape the life that had swallowed her whole. 12 hours earlier, the sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and bruised purple. Alara stood in her kitchen, a kitchen so small that she could touch both walls if she stretched out her arms, counting the money in her wallet. $5. That was all she had left. $5 to last until her next paycheck, which arrived in 3 days, which would amount to $212 before taxes. She had already calculated it, the way she calculated everything. $200 in her account after bills. Rent was due in 12 days. The amount owed was $1,400. She did not have $1,400. On the kitchen table, partially hidden under a stack of mail, was an eviction notice. The words were printed in red ink across the top: 12 days to vacate premises. She had read it so many times that she had stopped reading it, the way you stop hearing a sound that never stops. It was just part of the landscape of her life now, like the water stain on the ceiling or the refrigerator that hummed continuously or the neighbor's dog that barked every night at 2 a.m. "Mom." A small voice came from the bedroom. "Are you there?" "Yes, baby." "Go back to sleep." She put the $5 back into her wallet. In the refrigerator, there were 3 eggs, half a carton of milk, and some lettuce that was beginning to turn brown at the edges. In the cupboard, there was rice, canned beans, and peanut butter. She could stretch it. She had learned to stretch everything. She went into the bedroom where her son, Oliver, lay on a twin bed that was too small for him now that he was 7. He was sleeping, his small face peaceful in the darkness. She pressed her hand to his forehead, something she did every night, a mother's check for fever. His skin was warm but normal. She closed her eyes and said a prayer to a God she was no longer sure was listening. 3 days. She just had to survive 3 more days until the paycheck came. After that, she did not know what would happen. The eviction notice did not have an her after that. It only had the number, 12 days. She left the apartment at 9 p.m., the same time she always left for her shift at the Night Owl Diner. She worked 4 nights a week, 8 hours each shift, for $5.47 per hour. It was not enough. It had never been enough. She had run the numbers 1,000 times. She had asked for raises 3 times. The answer was always the same: that's what we can afford. If you don't want it, someone else will take the job. The November wind cut through her thin jacket as she walked toward the bus stop. She did not have a car. Cars cost money for payments, insurance, gas. Instead, she walked 2 blocks and caught the number 7 bus, which took her downtown to the diner. The ride cost $3. That left her with $2. The Night Owl was quiet when she arrived. The pre-shift crew was finishing up, and the nighttime manager, David, was counting the register. The diner smelled like it always did, like coffee that had been sitting too long and grease that coated the air. The black and white checkered floor was worn through in places, showing the concrete underneath. The booths were vinyl from the 1970s, cracked and patched with duct tape. The neon sign out front, a pale blue owl with red eyes, buzzed constantly. "You're early," David said, barely looking up. The bus came faster tonight. She clocked in at 9:52 p.m. Her shift officially started at 10 p.m. She hung her jacket on the hook in the back and tied on her apron. The apron was stained from the shift 2 days ago, but she had not had time to wash it properly. The first 4 hours were slow. A few truckers came through, ordered coffee and pie. A couple sat in the corner booth, not eating, just talking in low voices. By 1 a.m., Alara was alone except for David, who had retreated to the back office. She began mopping the floor, pushing the mop in methodical lines across the cracked tiles. She thought about Oliver, asleep at home with a neighbor she paid $5 to watch him. She thought about the eviction notice. She thought about the fact that she had applied for 12 jobs in the last month and received 0 callbacks. She thought about what would happen if she lost the apartment. Where would she take Oliver? To a shelter? To her sister's house, where Oliver's uncle already drank too much and said things to her that made her skin crawl. She did not let herself finish these thoughts. She pushed the mop. She moved forward. At 2:13 a.m., she was restocking the napkin dispensers when the front door of the diner opened. Unusual. Very few people came in at that hour. It was David's night off. Technically, he was only there to close out the register. She looked up. 3 men in dark suits entered. Not truckers. Not insomniacs grabbing late-night food. Their suits were expensive, tailored, made of fabric that caught the light differently than anything Alara had ever touched. They carried themselves with a kind of confidence that came from never being told no. They sat down in the back booth without acknowledging her. Alara walked over to them, notepad in hand. "What can I get you?" The man in the center, broad-shouldered with a scar that ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, looked up at her. His eyes were empty, calculating. "Coffee." "Black." 3 coffees, one of the others added. She nodded and walked away. As she poured the coffee, she felt the weight of their attention on her back. They were waiting for someone. They were angry. These were not intuitions based on observation, they were certainties that her body understood. She brought the coffees and left them alone. For the next hour, she worked the diner, aware of them in the way an animal is aware of predators nearby. They did not leave. They did not talk loudly. One of them made a phone call, spoke in Italian, hung up. They waited. At 3:15 a.m., she heard raised voices from the alley behind the diner. A shout. A sound that might have been a gunshot, or might have been a car backfiring. She froze. The three men stood immediately and left through the front door, moving toward the alley. The diner was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Alara stood alone in the empty restaurant, her heart racing for reasons she could not name. She did not know what had happened in that alley. She did not know that it had been a meeting between Luca Vitoli and men who reported to Anthony Marchetti, a final conversation before the betrayal. She did not know that in 90 seconds a bullet would be fired, and everything would change. She went back to mopping, because that was what she did. She moved forward. She survived. And when she heard the commotion in the storage room moments later, sounds of distress, urgent movement, she simply dropped her mop and moved toward the sound, the way any person moves toward danger when someone else is drowning. She did not know that the next 5 minutes would change her entire life. She did not know that the stranger she was about to save would change everything. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. The storage room smelled like cardboard and industrial cleaner, a place where dreams went to die alongside forgotten inventory. Alara Cole pushed her mop across the cracked tiles of the diner's back hallway, her orthopedic shoes squeaking against the wet floor with each step, her lower back screaming a familiar song of pain that had become the rhythm of her survival. She was 31 years old. She looked 40. The fluorescent light above buzzed like an angry wasp trapped in plastic, casting everything in a sickly white glow that made her hands look skeletal as she wrung out her mop for the 100th time that night. The November rain hammered against the diner's back windows like fists demanding entry. Outside, the city of Los Angeles sprawled in dark indifference, millions of people asleep in warm beds while Alara moved through the graveyard shift like a ghost made of exhaustion and desperation. Her second shift. 12 hours total today. Tomorrow she would do the same. The day after that, she would do the same. This was the shape of her life now. This was the mathematics of survival. At 11:47 p.m., her manager Carlos had counted out her tips into her trembling palm. $23.50. For 6 hours of smiling at strangers who did not see her. For refilling coffee cups for people who looked through her as if she were made of air. She had folded the bills carefully, slowly, aware of each one as if it were made of gold instead of paper. Then she had removed $5 from her apron pocket, all the money she had left in the world after rent and hospital bills, and placed it with the tips. $28.50. This was her wealth. This was everything between her and nothing. Her son Oliver was 7 years old and dying. Not today. Not this week. But the doctors had said it clearly, without the mercy of softer language. His heart valve was failing. Congenital heart defect, they called it, a cruel joke written into his body at birth, a time bomb that only grew louder as he grew taller. The surgery to replace it cost $200,000. The deadline was 14 days. She had $600 saved. The mathematics did not require a calculator. Alara had driven 40 miles from the hospital to the diner at 4 p.m. that afternoon, arriving with the taste of tears still on her lips, arriving with the image of Oliver's small face against white pillows still burned into her vision. He had been asleep when she left. She had kissed his forehead, careful not to disturb the four taped to his small arm, and whispered a prayer to a God she no longer believed in. Then she had clocked in and begun the work of pretending to be a person who could smile. Her apartment kitchen counter held a landscape of medical bills. Papers fanned across the laminate like evidence of a crime of being born sick, of having no insurance, of being a widow with no family and no one to help. $200,000 for the surgery. $47,000 already past due. Payment plans rejected. Collection agencies calling at 7 in the morning before Oliver woke up, their voices cold and certain that she was hiding money, that she was refusing to pay, that the only thing between them and their full vengeance was bureaucratic process. On top of the bill sat another notice, this one printed in red ink, the paper heavier than the others, more final. An eviction notice with a deadline printed in bold, December 3rd, 12 days. If she did not pay $3,200 in rent by that date, she and Oliver would be on the street. The mathematics was impossible. Rent plus hospital bills plus food plus Oliver's prescriptions. There was not enough math in the world to make these numbers work. At 3 in the morning, she sat in her car in the hospital parking lot during her lunch break and counted coins from the cup holder. 63 cents. She had forgotten about the coins. She held them in her palm like they were evidence of something, though she did not know what. Evidence of trying. Evidence of failing. She had eaten a packet of stale crackers for dinner before her night shift. Saltines. They tasted like cardboard and desperation. Now, at 3:18 a.m., the storage room door crashed open. The sound tore through the quiet diner like a gunshot. Alara froze, her hand still gripping the mop handle, her breath caught somewhere in her throat. She heard heavy breathing. Labored. Pained. She heard the shuffle of footsteps, unsteady, stumbling. She heard a man make a sound that was not quite a word, something between a gasp and a groan. She moved toward the sound without thinking. This was her nature. This was the thing in her that had survived 18 months of widowhood, 2 jobs, a dying son, and the slow erosion of hope. When something was drowning, she swam toward it. When something was hurt, she moved toward the pain instead of away. In the storage room, she found a man. He was tall, 6'1", with the kind of broad shoulders that belonged to someone who had never had to make himself smaller to survive. His face was dark hair, dark eyes, sharp cheekbones that looked carved rather than shaped by time. He was drenched in November rain and something else. Blood. His left side was soaked with it, the red spreading across an expensive white dress shirt like spilled wine across cream silk. His suit had cost more money than Alara had earned in the last 3 months. She knew this the way an animal knows the difference between predator and prey. She knew by the cut of the fabric. She knew by the weight of the fabric in her hands as she steadied him. "Help," he said. A single word, barely audible, his voice deep and solid like an oath being broken. Alara did not ask who he was. She did not ask what had happened. She did not ask if calling for help would bring danger down on her already ruined life. She simply moved. She moved him to the corner of the storage room, away from the back door, away from sight. She found a stack of clean aprons and pressed them against his wound. The blood was warm. Too warm. His eyes found her face and held it, searching for something she did not have to give. "Hospital," she said. Not a question. A declaration. Her phone was in her apron pocket. She called 911 with hands that barely shook, gave the address, said there was a man with a gunshot wound, said he needed an ambulance immediately. The dispatcher asked questions. Alara answered with the voice of someone who had learned how to function in crisis. "Yes, he is conscious. Yes, he is breathing. No, I do not know his name." She did not know his name. This stranger bleeding into her aprons, this man in a suit that cost more than her monthly rent, this stranger whose blood she was trying to stop with the same hands that had scrubbed toilets for minimum wage, she did not know anything about him except that he was alive, and then he was hurt, and then she was saving him. The sirens came at 3:54 a.m. Red light swept across the diner windows like a warning. Paramedics flooded through the storage room door, professional and efficient, moving him onto a stretcher with the certainty of people trained for exactly this moment. They asked her questions. She answered. They asked if she knew him. She said no. They asked if she had seen who shot him. She said she had heard a sound but did not know what it was. By 4:17 a.m., he was gone. The ambulance pulled away into the November night, its sirens fading like a prayer no one was listening to anymore. Alara stood in the storage room and looked at the blood on her aprons. The blood on her hands. The blood on the floor where she had knelt beside a stranger and done the only thing she knew how to do, she had tried to save him. She finished her shift. She mopped the blood from the tiles. She wiped the shelves. She counted her drawer and clocked out at 5:42 a.m. She drove 40 miles through the rain to Children's Hospital, arriving at 6:17 a.m. with exactly 30 minutes before her morning shift started at 6:45 at the hotel where she worked housekeeping. Oliver was still asleep when she arrived. She sat beside his hospital bed in the darkness, listening to the machines beep their mechanical heartbeat, watching her son's chest rise and fall, rise and fall. His heart was failing. In 2 weeks, without the surgery, the failing would become permanent. She had saved a stranger's life just hours ago. She could not save her own son's. She did not know that the stranger's name was Luca Vitoli. She did not know that he was the most dangerous man in Los Angeles. She did not know that the 3 men in dark suits who had been sitting in her diner at midnight were waiting for a death that never came. She did not know that by dragging that bleeding man to safety, by calling for help with her own trembling hands, she had just altered the trajectory of 2 lives, his and her own, in ways that neither of them could possibly imagine. She did not know that what happened next would be something no one could explain. The November rain fell in sheets against the windows of the Jefferson Elementary School playground. 3:47 in the afternoon. The sky was the color of old bruises. Alara Cole stood at the fence in her waitress uniform, a thin jacket pulled over the stained apron she had not had time to change, waiting for her neighbor to bring Oliver back from his weekly hospital visit home. Her breath came out in small clouds. Her hands were shoved deep in her pockets where her fingers touched 5 crumpled dollar bills and nothing else. She had not eaten since yesterday morning. 3 days had passed since the man with the gunshot wound. 3 days since she had dragged him across the diner floor, since her hands had been covered in blood that was not her own, since she had made the decision to save a stranger instead of calling the police and washing her hands of it. She had not thought about him since. There was no time for thinking about anything except Oliver, except the surgery, except the way the hospital bills kept arriving in envelopes marked urgent in letters so red they looked like blood. A soccer ball bounced across the playground, and a small boy, maybe 6 years old, maybe 7, chased it toward the street. The delivery truck was coming fast. Alara did not think. Her body moved before her mind caught up, her legs carrying her forward in a sprint that her exhausted muscles did not know they still possessed. She lunged into the street and grabbed the boy around the waist, pulling him backward as the truck screamed past so close she felt the heat of it, smelled the diesel and burnt rubber. The boy clung to her, screaming. She knelt in the rain, her knees soaking through her jeans, her hands shaking as she checked his arms and legs and spine, the way the pediatric nurse had taught her to check Oliver after his last fall. "You're okay," she whispered, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind. "You're safe. You're safe." 2 men in black suits appeared from nowhere. They moved with the kind of purposeful silence that made Alara's blood go cold. The taller one, Marco, though she did not know his name, was already dialing his phone while his eyes stayed locked on her face. The other man, Theo, stood motionless, staring at her as if she had just risen from the dead. Because she had risen from the dead, in a way. She was the woman from the diner storage room. The woman with $5 in her pocket and a dead son waiting to happen. The woman who had saved Luca Vitoli's life 3 nights ago without knowing who he was, without knowing that men like Marco and Theo would spend the rest of their lives loyal to a boss because he showed them mercy they had never earned. "It's okay," Alara said to the boy, smoothing his wet hair. She did not know who he was. She did not know that he was connected to the most dangerous man in Los Angeles. The boy's name was Vincenzo. He was Luca's nephew. He had been playing in the mansion's back courtyard when he escaped through an unlocked gate, drawn by the sound of children and the promise of freedom. His parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago. His uncle had raised him in an empire of violence and loyalty, trying to keep him innocent in a world that did not allow innocence to survive. 20 minutes later, a different car arrived. It was a black Mercedes, and when the door opened, Luca Vitoli stepped out onto the rain-soaked asphalt. He wore a cashmere coat that cost more than Alara made in a year, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a small dark stain at the hem that might have been blood or might have been rain. His left side was bandaged beneath his white shirt. He moved carefully, favoring his right leg, each step deliberate and controlled. His dark eye swept across the playground until they found her. She was kneeling in the mud, rain soaking through her thin jacket, her hair plastered to her face, her hands gentle on a child who was not her own. Luca stopped walking. In his 37 years, Luca Vitoli had ordered 11 men killed. He had watched his father die when he was 15 years old, had buried him in the cemetery on the east side of the city where all the family's dead lay in rows like soldiers. He had built an empire on vengeance and fear and the understanding that mercy was a luxury the strong could not afford. He had never shown mercy. He had never kneeled beside anyone like this. He had never knelt at all. But he was kneeling now, moving to the ground beside Alara and Vincenzo, his cashmere coat soaking through. His hands, scarred and gold-ringed, reached out to help her to her feet. She stood, shaking, mud on her knees, her orthopedic shoes squeaking as she shifted her weight. She looked at his face, the sharp angles of his jaw, the scar that ran from his left temple down to his cheekbone, the eyes that were storm gray and holding something that looked almost like tears. She did not recognize him. "Thank you," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "My nephew. You saved him." "He ran into the street," Alara said. "Anyone would have." "No." Luca's hand was still on her arm, his fingers gentle against her cheap jacket. "Not everyone. Not anyone. You." Marco approached, holding out 5 $100 bills. "For your trouble, and for what you did." Alara shook her head. She was trembling. She was starving. She had $5 to last until Friday and her son had 9 days left before his heart gave out. She shook her head and stepped backward. "I don't need money for doing the right thing," she said. Marco and Theo exchanged a look. In 15 years of working for Luca Vitoli, they had never seen anyone refuse money without hesitation. They had never seen their boss's expression shift like that, something like recognition crossing his face, something like the memory of a world that existed before violence, before empires, before the understanding that everyone could be bought. Alara turned and walked away into the rain. Luca watched her go. The expensive coat, the mud on her knees, the way she moved like someone carrying a weight that never got lighter. He turned to Marco. His voice, when he spoke, was soft and final. "Find out everything about her. Everything." That evening, in the mansion office on the 42nd floor where the city lights looked like stars you could buy, Luca sat in silence while Marco presented a file. The file contained a life, Alara Cole, age 31, widow, employed at Joe's Diner and Murphy's late-night care facility. Son named Oliver, age 7, congenital heart valve defect, requires $200,000 surgical intervention within 9 days. Current savings, $600.37. Monthly income, approximately $840. Eviction notice received November 12. 12 days to vacate. Total monthly rent, $1,200. The gap between what she earned and what she needed was a chasm you could not cross by working harder. Luca read the file in absolute silence. He saw his father's body. He saw the moment he had decided that mercy was for people who could afford to lose everything. He saw the blood on Alara's hands that night in the diner, the trembling of her fingers as she dialed 911, the way she had stayed beside a dying stranger when she could have walked away. "What do you want us to do?" Theo asked. Luca closed the file. His scar caught the light from the windows, a pale line across his dark skin. "Bring her here. Tomorrow morning. Before her shift." The next dawn was grey and cold. Alara walked out of the diner at 7:23 a.m., carrying $31 in tips and the weight of 9 days pressing down like a stone on her chest. The rain had stopped but the world was still wet, everything glistening and treacherous. A black Mercedes pulled up beside her. Marco stepped out. "Miss Cole. Mr. Vitoli would like to speak with you." Alara's heart stopped. She remembered the blood. She remembered the expensive suit and the dying man's face and the knowledge that she had witnessed something she was not supposed to witness. She took a step backward. "I don't know any Mr. Vitoli. Please leave me alone. The man you saved in the diner storage room 5 nights ago. He wants to thank you properly." Her hands went cold. How could he know that? How could anyone know? "It's about your son Oliver," Marco said quietly. Mr. Vitoli wants to help. The world tilted. Alara's voice came out as barely a whisper. How do you know about Oliver? Please. Just one conversation. She followed him into the car because she was desperate, and 9 days was not enough time, and sometimes when you are drowning you grab at anything, even if it looks like a blade wrapped in ice. The mansion rose like a throne from the hillside overlooking Los Angeles. Iron gates. Security cameras at every corner. Men in suits standing in the shadows. Alara's orthopedic shoes squeaked on marble floors that reflected the light like water. A chandelier hung above her head, impossibly large, impossibly expensive. She clutched her purse containing exactly $5. She was led to a sitting room with windows that looked out at the entire city, and then Luca Vitoli entered. He was dressed in black slacks and a white shirt with the first button undone. The bandage at his side was visible, a white rectangle beneath white fabric. He moved with controlled precision, each step measured. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment she saw something raw in them, something that looked like recognition, like the memory of a man who had almost died. "You saved my life," he said simply. Alara's voice shook. "You didn't need to bring me here. I don't want a reward." "I know. You already refused $500 from my men. You refused it twice." He gestured toward a chair. She perched on the edge, aware that the chair alone probably cost more than everything she owned, more than her entire apartment, more than her car and her furniture and the hospital bills stacked on her kitchen table combined. Luca sat across from her. "Your son needs heart surgery. $200,000. You have 9 days. Tears burned her eyes. She did not ask how he knew. She already understood that men like Luca Vitoli made it their business to know everything. "I know because I choose to know," he continued, his voice still quiet. "You work 2 jobs. You make $5.47 per hour. You have $600 saved and an eviction notice with your name on it in red ink. You will lose your apartment in 12 days. You cannot afford the surgery. Without the surgery, Oliver will die." Alara stood up, shaking. "Why would you help me? I'm nobody." The word hung in the air between them. Luca's expression shifted. In 15 years, Marco and Theo, standing in the doorway, had never heard their boss speak with this tone, this gentleness, this terrible vulnerability. "You are the woman who saved my life when you had every reason to walk away. You had $5 in your pocket. You used your own phone to call for help. You stayed beside me until the ambulance came. You asked for nothing." He stood. "In my world, nobody does that. Nobody." He moved closer. "I will pay for Oliver's surgery. All $200,000. I will clear your eviction notice. I will make sure you never have to choose between rent and food again." Alara was crying, her hands covering her mouth. "Why? Why would you do this?" "Because you showed me something I thought was dead. Mercy. And because I believe in debts. You gave me my life. Let me give your son his." But what Alara did not know was that saving Luca's life had also painted a target on her back. That afternoon, a man named Anthony Marchetti, Luca's nephew, 32 years old, wearing a designer suit he did not earn, learned that his uncle had saved the diner waitress's life. He made calls. Within 3 hours he knew her address, her schedule, her son's hospital room number. He smiled. The woman who saved Luca was the perfect weapon. She was the perfect way to destroy him. And at almost the same moment, a woman named Evelyn Blackwell, wealthy, severe, 53 years old, connected to everyone who mattered in Los Angeles, arrived at Luca's office for an evening meeting. She saw Alara's name in his calendar. Oliver Surgery Coordination. Children's Hospital. She smiled, cold and sharp as a blade. "I heard you're playing charity case with some diner waitress," she said over wine that cost $500 a bottle. "How sentimental. How weak." She left with that smile still in place, already planning how to use this information, already circling like a predator who has caught the scent of blood. 2 enemies. 2 threats. Anna Laracole, standing in a marble mansion with $5 in her purse, had no idea that the salvation Luca offered had come with a price written in blood. 6 days after Alara refused Luca's help, the November rain fell like needles against her jacket as she pushed through the diner's back door at 11:34 p.m. The parking lot was empty except for one black SUV idling near the streetlight. A man stepped out. Anthony Marchetti. 32 years old, designer suit tailored in Milan, gold Rolex catching the rain. His smile was the smile of someone who had never been told no. Alara Cole, he said, his voice smooth as poison. We need to talk. She backed toward the diner's entrance. I don't know you. But I know you. He moved closer, each step deliberate. I know your son Oliver is having heart surgery in 3 days. I know Luca Vitoli is paying for it. $200,000. Very generous. Very romantic. His laugh was cruel. Do you have any idea who I am? No. I'm the nephew Luca never wanted to acknowledge. The one he pushed aside. The one he didn't consider worthy of the family business. Anthony's eyes were dark, empty like abandoned wells. But I have resources. Connections. People who work for me in places you wouldn't expect. Like Children's Hospital, for instance. Alara's blood turned to ice. I own the anesthesiologist who will put your son to sleep. I own the surgical nurse who will monitor his vitals. I own the orderly who will wheel him into recovery. Anthony stepped so close she could smell his cologne, expensive and suffocating. One wrong medication dose. One power outage during the crucial moment. One mistake in post-op care. Accidents happen every day in hospitals, Sweatherer. Terrible, tragic accidents. Her whole body trembled. You're threatening to kill my son. I'm giving you a choice. He pulled a card from his pocket, placed it in her shaking hand. A phone number. Nothing else. You're going to call Luca Vitoli today. You're going to tell him you've changed your mind about his help. You're going to move out of his guest house. You're going to disappear from his life completely. You have 24 hours. And if I don't, then Oliver never makes it off that operating table. Anthony walked back to the SUV, paused at the door. 24 hours, Alara. After that, his surgery becomes very, very risky. The car pulled away, tires hissing on wet pavement. Alara stood alone in the rain, the card burning in her palm like a curse she couldn't shake. The next morning, 9:17 a.m., Alara sat in Oliver's hospital room watching him sleep. His tiny chest rose and fell. 2 days. Surgery in 2 days. She had not slept. She had not eaten. She had only sat in darkness, replaying Anthony's threats, calculating impossible choices. The knock on the door was sharp, authoritative. Evelyn Blackwell stood in the doorway wearing a cream-colored suit that cost more than Alara's monthly rent. She was 53 years old but moved like a woman who had never been denied anything. Her grey hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her features into a permanent expression of disdain. You must be the charity case, Evelyn said, stepping inside without invitation. Her heels clicked on the linoleum floor. Luca's little diner waitress. How unexpected. Alara stood. Can I help you? On the contrary, dear. I'm here to help you. Evelyn moved to the window, looking down at the city sprawling below. I sit on this hospital's board of directors. I have been instrumental in securing the best surgeons, the most advanced equipment, the funding that keeps this institution running. Which means I have influence here. Real influence. Alara said nothing. You're wondering what I want. Evelyn turned, her eyes like chips of ice. I want you to understand something. Men like Luca Vitoli don't save people out of kindness. They save people because it serves them. You're a transaction. A temporary distraction. a story he'll tell at parties to prove he's not entirely without a conscience. She moved closer. When he's bored of playing savior, you'll be back in that diner, except now you'll owe him everything. Your life. Your son's life. His debt will follow you forever. He saved my son's life, Alara said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Your son's surgery is scheduled for 2 days from now. 7 in the morning. Dr. Patterson is the surgeon. Evelyn leaned against the hospital bed. It would be tragic if Dr. Patterson suddenly became unavailable. If the surgical suite needed emergency maintenance. If your insurance pre-authorization got misplaced in some filing system. These things happen. Alara's breath caught. You have a choice, Evelyn said softly. Stay away from Luca Vitoli. Tell him you don't need his help. Disappear from his life. And Oliver's surgery proceeds without incident. She straightened her jacket. Or refuse, and watch me make phone calls that will postpone this surgery indefinitely. Your son doesn't have indefinitely, does he? His heart is failing. Every day without surgery is 1 day closer to death. She walked to the door, paused in the frame. 24 hours, Alara. Same deadline Anthony gave you, I imagine. Men like us, we think alike. The door closed. Oliver stirred in his sleep, his small hand reaching across the blanket. Alara took it, held it against her face, and felt something break inside her chest. That night at 2:22 a.m., Alara sat in her old apartment in the dark. The eviction notice lay on the table, red ink screaming, for days remaining. Oliver's surgery, 36 hours. Rain hammered the windows like it was trying to break through. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from Marco. On the table beside the eviction notice sat a bottle of sleeping pills. Prescribed 6 months ago. Unopened until tonight. If she stayed close to Luca, Anthony would kill Oliver during surgery. If she walked away, Evelyn would postpone it indefinitely. Either direction led to death. Her son's death. And she was so tired of fighting. She opened the bottle. The pills rattled like tiny bones. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold them. She thought about Oliver's voice, small and frightened, asking why his heart didn't work like other kids' hearts. She thought about the hospital bills that had bankrupted her. She thought about the $5 in her purse right now, the last money in the world that belonged to her. She was raising the bottle to her mouth when her phone buzzed. A text from the nurse on Oliver's floor. A photo attached. Oliver asleep in his hospital bed, moonlight through the window painting his small face silver. In his arms was the stuffed bear Alara had bought at a thrift store for $1.50. On his bedside table, a child's drawing in blue and red crayon. Stick figures. A woman and a boy holding hands. Words in Oliver's careful printing, "Mommy is the bravest." Alara set the pills down. She set them down with both hands because her whole body was shaking. She wiped her face. She breathed. Then she picked up the phone and dialed. Marco? This is Alara. I need to speak to Luca. Right now. And Marco, I need to tell him everything. Within 1 hour, Luca Vitoli sat across from Alara in her apartment, listening to every word. His face remained stone. His hands remained steady. When she finished speaking, when she told him about Anthony's threat and Evelyn's manipulation, when she showed him the card with the phone number, Luca was quiet for exactly 40 seconds. Then he made 2 phone calls. At 4:23 a.m., 12 men in tactical gear moved like shadows through the penthouse on Wilshire Boulevard. FBI. Federal warrants. Anthony Marchetti was dragged from his bed in silk boxers, screaming, his arms wrenched behind his back. The handcuff snapped shut with a sound like a trap closing. News cameras captured everything. The nephew of Luca Vitoli arrested for conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder of a federal witness. Extortion. Racketeering. The perp walk was broadcast live, Anthony's face twisted with disbelief that consequences existed for people like him. Later, in a federal holding cell, Anthony collapsed to his knees. His lawyer tried to comfort him. His uncle was destroying him completely. At 5:24 a.m., FBI agents in suits entered Evelyn Blackwell's estate in Brentwood. The property was worth $7 million. They seized it in 45 minutes. Financial crimes. Medicare fraud. Embezzlement from the hospital. Bribery of city officials. All the evidence had been delivered to the federal prosecutor in a single file by Luca's forensic accountants. Evelyn was led out in handcuffs, her silk robe over pajamas, her face crumbling like a building being demolished. 40 years federal prison. Total financial ruin. Her name spread across every news outlet in the state. That morning, Luca watched the coverage from Alara's apartment, his hand resting on her shoulder as she held Oliver's photo. Death would be too quick, he said quietly. Too easy. Too merciful. They will suffer every day for the rest of their lives, knowing they lost everything because they threatened you and your son. Because they believed you were nobody. And I am going to spend the rest of my life proving that you are everything. Oliver's surgery proceeded exactly as scheduled. Dr. Patterson performed the operation flawlessly. The surgical suite never had a single equipment failure. The anesthesia was administered perfectly. 12 hours after entering the operating room, Oliver emerged with his heart valve repaired, his small chest wrapped in bandages, his future restored. Alara held him as he woke, tears streaming down her face, whispering the same prayer over and over, "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." The surgical waiting room smelled like antiseptic and desperation. Alara sat in a plastic chair that had been sat in by 10,000 desperate people before her, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The clock on the wall read 8:19 a.m. Oliver had been in surgery for 1 hour and 13 minutes. He had 15 more to go. Luca Vitali sat beside her without speaking. He wore a black cashmere coat over a grey suit, and every person in the waiting room could feel the weight of his presence like pressure in the air itself. His bodyguards waited outside the room, 2 men with shoulders like doorways, their eyes never blinking. But inside this small room with the beige walls and the fluorescent lights that hummed like a trapped insect, Luca was perfectly still. He did not check his phone. He did not shift his weight. He simply sat there. And somehow, his stillness was more comforting than any words could have been. Alara's lips moved in a silent prayer. She had prayed every night for 2 weeks. She had prayed in the diner while mopping the floors. She had prayed in the hospital hallway while filling out consent forms she could barely read through her tears. She had prayed this morning at 5 a.m. when they wheeled Oliver into pre-op, his small body in a hospital gown, his eyes searching for his mother's face. "He's going to be fine," Luca said quietly. His voice was low, steady, like someone soothing a frightened animal. Alara did not respond. She could not trust her voice not to shatter. Another hour passed. Then another. The clock became an enemy. Every minute stretched like taffy. A nurse came by twice with coffee Alara did not drink. A social worker appeared with information about financial assistance programs. Alara nodded without hearing any of it. All she could think was that her son was lying on a surgical table while a surgeon cut into his chest, opened his ribs, touched the muscle that kept him alive. At 12:53 p.m., the surgical doors opened. Dr. Patterson emerged, still in his scrubs, his surgical mask hanging around his neck. He was smiling. Alara stood up so fast the chair scraped backward against the floor. Luca rose beside her, his hand finding the small of her back. "The surgery was a complete success," Dr. Patterson said. His voice was warm, competent, the voice of someone who had delivered good news to desperate people and knew exactly how to do it. "Oliver's new valve is functioning perfectly. His heart is strong. The surgical team encountered no complications. He's in recovery now, and he's going to be fine." Alara's knees buckled. She would have fallen if Luca had not caught her, his arms wrapping around her carefully, as if she were made of glass. She collapsed into him, and the tears came, not delicate tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere beneath her ribs, from the place where she had been holding her breath for 14 days. "He's going to be fine," she whispered against Luca's chest. "He's going to be fine. He's going to be." "He is going to be fine," Luca confirmed, his voice barely a whisper. His own eyes were wet, though his face remained composed. Marco, standing just outside the waiting room door, saw his boss's shoulders shake slightly. In 15 years, he had never seen Luca Vitoli cry. He turned away discreetly, giving them privacy in public the way a good soldier knows how. 2 weeks later, Oliver's surgical scars were beginning to fade from angry red to pale pink. His energy had returned like someone flipping a switch. He ran through the small house Luca had purchased, not the fortress in the hills, but something entirely different. 3 bedrooms on a tree-lined street in Silver Lake. A front porch with a swing. A backyard with grass and a fence, and a neighborhood where children's laughter was the soundtrack. The deed was in Alara's name. No conditions. No strings. Luca had simply handed her the paperwork and walked away before she could protest. "This is too much," she had said, her voice shaking. "No," Luca replied. "It is not enough. But it is what I can give you now, and you will take it because I need you to have a place that is safe. A place that is yours. A place where you stop surviving and start living." Oliver skidded across the hardwood floors in his socks, his laugh high and bright like a bell that had been broken and was now ringing again. His heart was strong. The surgery had worked. The miracle had happened. Alara started classes at community college the following Monday. Nursing program. Her tuition was covered. Her books were paid for. She attended classes during the morning while Oliver was at school, worked part-time at the diner in the evenings, but now she worked because she wanted connection with the other waitresses, not because she needed the $5 in her pocket to stretch across for days. That had changed too. Everything had changed. Luca came to dinner twice a week. He would arrive in a regular SUV instead of the armored Mercedes. He would remove his jacket in the kitchen, rolling his shirt sleeves up past his elbows like a man who was about to wash dishes. Marco and Theo waited outside in the car, reading newspapers, giving him privacy. One evening in late November, Oliver was asleep upstairs, his small chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm, his heart beating strong inside his healed body. Alara and Luca sat on the porch while rain fell soft and steady, the kind of gentle rain that washed the world clean. "I don't know how to do this," Luca said. The words came slowly, as if each one cost him something. "Be normal. Be safe for someone. I have spent my entire life being the thing people fear. And now I am sitting on a porch watching it rain, and all I want is to not terrify you." Alara turned to look at him. In the darkness, she could see the scar on his face where the bullet had grazed him that night. It had healed into something almost invisible. Almost. "Neither do I," she said softly. "Know how to do this. I have spent my entire life being invisible. Being nobody. And now I want to be seen. To be known. To stay." She took his hand. His palm was warm, rough with calluses, solid. "We'll figure it out together." The rain continued to fall. It had fallen that night when he came through the diner's back door bleeding. It fell now, gentle and cleansing, and neither of them moved to go inside. 6 months later, spring sunshine painted the small house gold. Oliver played soccer in the backyard, his small body strong and fast, his laugh carrying across the fence to the neighbor's yard. His surgical scar had faded to almost nothing. In another year, you would have to look very carefully to see it at all. Alara sat on the porch with her nursing textbooks spread beside her. She was 3 semesters in. Her grades were excellent. The other students did not know about the diner, about the eviction notices, about the night she had counted pennies. She was just another woman trying to build something better, and that was exactly what she was. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Not the armored vehicle from before, but something ordinary, something that did not announce itself. Luca stepped out, and Oliver abandoned the soccer ball mid-kick, running toward him with the complete abandon of a child who had learned that people come back. Luca caught him, lifting him high, spinning him once, twice, laughing. It was not the laugh of a mafia boss. It was the laugh of a man who had been given a second chance and knew exactly how rare that was. Alara rose from her chair, her textbooks forgotten. Luca set Oliver down, and the boy ran back to his soccer ball, already distracted by the next game. Luca climbed the porch steps, and Alara met him there. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close, and they stood together watching Oliver play. "I have something for you," Luca said. "No more houses," Alara said, but she was smiling. "No." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small box. Black velvet. His hands were trembling slightly as he opened it. Inside was a ring, not ostentatious, not dripping with diamonds, but simple and elegant, white gold with a single sapphire stone the color of her eyes. "I know I am not the man you deserve," Luca continued quietly. "I know my world is dangerous, that my past is a graveyard. But I have watched you save my life. I have watched you be strong when strength seemed impossible. I have watched you love your son through a miracle. And I am asking you, in front of this house and this porch and this man who destroyed everything that tried to hurt you, will you marry me?" Alara did not speak. She could not. Instead, she held out her hand, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It felt like coming home. Oliver noticed and ran over, suddenly understanding that something important was happening. Luca lifted him, and Alara wrapped her arms around both of them, and the three of them stood on the porch while the spring sun turned everything gold. Alara Cole had arrived at the diner that November night with $5 in her pocket and a broken heart. She had mopped floors and counted coins and whispered prayers to a God who seemed very far away. She had saved a dying stranger without knowing he was the most dangerous man in Los Angeles. She had expected nothing. She had asked for nothing but a chance to keep her son alive. But mercy multiplies. The man she saved became her salvation. The woman he had dismissed as invisible became everything. The child whose heart was broken was healed. And the widow and the mafia boss, two people forged in darkness, became the proof that light can grow anywhere, even in the places where no one thought to look for it. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story that will change how you see the world. Drop a comment telling us what you thought. What would you have done if you were Luca? What would you have done if you were Alara? We read every single one. The next story drops in 24 hours. Don't miss it. We wish you good health, joyful days, and a life filled with peace and happiness. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.